lived from 1864 to 1936. He was an interesting character, very big intellectual in Spain. He was a professor of Greek in University of Salamanca, and he was a liberal, politically speaking. He grew up as a Catholic. His father died when he was young. His mother raised him, and he wanted to be a priest at one point in his life. He was very, very frum Catholic, but he fell in love with a beautiful young lady, and he said, I'd rather marry her than become a priest, and he did. He married her, and he didn't become a priest. But he was an outspoken liberal, and he ran into trouble with one of the prime ministers of Spain, and he had to go into exile. So he went to Spain, he went to France for a while. And then he came back later, and he was reappointed to Salamanca as a professor of Greek. And then again, he ran into trouble with the Franco government, and he died in 1936. It was mysterious how he died. Did he commit suicide? Was he murdered? There's a big machloket why he died, how he died. He was 72 years old. But he died a strange death. Probably, according to the latest scholars, probably he was murdered by the political opposition. During his tenure in Spain, he wrote poetry, he wrote fiction, he wrote novels, he wrote essays. He was very, very well known. And the book we're going to discuss today first is called, that he wrote, it's called Don Manuel Bueno, Martyr. In English, it's called Don Manuel Martyr or Saint Manuel Martyr. They're different translations. Who is this Saint Manuel? What's this book about? Okay. The book is like a very short novel. If you've read it, you know. And it's like a diary, so to speak, by a narrator named Angela Carbalino. She was a student of a minister, a priest in this community, whose name was Don Manuel. And it was in a city called Valverde de Lucerna. This was a small village, had a beautiful lake, mountains in the distance. And this saint, he wasn't a saint yet, he was a priest, was so holy and so respected and so venerated by the community. He could have gotten bigger jobs, but he never wanted to leave that one community. He said, my community is here, I'm going to work in this one community. And after he died, there was a movement set up by the church to see if they could make him into an official saint of the Catholic Church. And the person in charge of trying to find out if he should be a saint was interviewing different people to find out if this person qualified to be a saint. And among the people was this Angela Carbalino. And so she wrote this diary, so to speak, or an account about this Don Manuel. And here's what she said. How did he love his people? His life consisted in rescuing wrecked marriages, enforcing unruly sons to submit to their parents, or reconciling parents to their sons, but above all, consoling the embittered and the weary in spirit, while helping everybody to die well. He was literally a saint. He gave his whole life to his people, morning, noon, and night. Angela once asked him, you always are alone though, even though you're serving everybody else. There's something, you're always busy, busy, busy. Don't you have time for yourself? And here's what she quotes Don Manuel. Thinking idly is thinking as a substitute for doing. Thinking too much about what is already done instead of about what must be done. What's done is done and over with. One must go on to something else because nothing is worse than remorse without proper relief. Action, action. So she says, even in those early days, I had already begun to realize that Don Manuel fled from being left to think in solitude, and I guessed that some obsession haunted him. He was always busy, always going from house to house, from person to person, counseling, and suddenly this very sensitive young lady who was a very big fan of his was wondering, how is he living this kind of life, always full of activity? And she says as follows, his constant activity, his unending intervention in the tasks and diversions of everyone has the appearance of a flight from himself, a flight from solitude. He confirmed the suspicion. I have a fear of solitude, he would say. And still, from time to time, he would go off by himself along the shores of the lake. Okay, so this is the beginning of the story. Well, this Angelina has a brother named Lazarus. In the New Testament, Lazarus is a person who comes back from the dead. I'm not going to go into New Testament theology, but the name was not just chosen at random. Lazarus was a town Epicurus. He was a non-believer. He spent time abroad in America, and he became a non-believer. Then he came back to his village to visit. And the sister said, please come and meet Don Manuel, come and spend some time with him. I don't believe in this. I'm not going to go to church, whatever. Long story short, he eventually does go to church, and he listens to Don Manuel, and he's taken. Oh, wow, this man is a man of great spirit, a man of great genius. I'm very drawn to him. I want to know more about him. Again, making a long story short, he becomes a follower of Don Manuel and a confidant. They become very close friends. At one point, they're walking together along the lake. And Lazarus, who is now reborn as a true Catholic, asks Don Manuel, there's something wrong. You're a wonderful, holy, spiritual person. You preach with great passion. You love the people love you. But you still have a suspicion. Do you really believe what you're doing? Oh, the question you should never ask somebody. Do you believe in what you're doing? Do you believe in the faith? So Lazarus says, I shall never forget the day on which I said to him, but Don Manuel, the truth above all. And he, all shook up, whispered in my ear, though we were all alone in the middle of the countryside, the truth? The truth, Lazarus, is perhaps something so unbearable, so terrible, something so deadly that simple people could not live with it. Don Manuel goes on, I am put here to live life, I am put here to give life to the souls of my charges, to make them happy, to make them dream that they are immortal, and not to destroy them. The important thing is that they live sanely in harmony with each other. And with the truth, with my truth, they could not live at all. Let them live. That is what the church does. It lets them live. As for true religion, all religions are true as long as they give spiritual life to the people who profess them, as long as they console them for having been born only to die. And for people, the truest religion is their own, the religion that made them. And mine? Mine consists in consoling myself by consoling others, even though the consolation I give them is not mine. Uh-oh. What's Don Manuel saying? I'm giving my life to serve the people. I'm preaching the church. I'm preaching the gospel. I'm giving them their last rites. I'm going through all the ceremonies of the church. In my mind of minds, I don't believe in it. Whoa. Here's a person who externally is a saint. He follows all the mitzvot to the maximum. In his mind, he doesn't believe. What's his basic lack of belief? His basic lack of belief, which I'm not going to spell out now in full, is he doesn't believe in an afterlife. We tell people they're immortal. We tell them they have souls. We tell them that they're going to be rewarded or punished in the next world, but I don't believe in that. How do you have a religion that does not base itself on the next world? This we're going to discuss in some other aspect of Unamuno's writings, which I'll discuss in a few moments. But what happens, just think for ourselves, if we were convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no next world, that once we die, it's all over, how does that affect our religious observance? On one level, hey, we observe mitzvot because in our back of our minds, we know that eventually one day we'll have a reward in the Garden of Eden in the next world. And we avoid sins because if we do sins, we're afraid we're going to get punished one day. But what happens if we didn't have those carrots or punishments in the background? What happens if we just live now without any idea that we have immortal souls? I'm not going to answer the question. Everyone has to answer that for himself. But for Don Manuel, the answer is I'm not going to be concerned about the next world. I have to be concerned about this world. How do we make people happy? How do we offer people consolation? If they need to believe in the next world, let them believe in the next world. My job isn't to philosophize with them. My job is not to let them have truth. My job is to let them be happy, live content, live righteous lives. Now, Don Manuel, towards the end of the novel, is about to die. So who's there with him? Lazarus. Here's what he says. Listen to me, Lazarus. Watch over these poor sheep. Find some comfort for them in living, and let them believe what I could not. And Lazarus, when your hour comes, die as I die, as Angela will die, in the arms of the Holy Mother Church, Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman. That is to say, of the Holy Mother Church of Valverde de Lucerna. And now farewell, until we never meet again, for this dream of life is coming to an end. Oh my. He's dying. He thinks this is the end. There is no afterlife. And we'll never meet again. Our souls are over. We're done. But I want to die in the arms of the Mother Church. And I want you to die in the arms of the Mother Church. In other words, there's this great, I don't want to call it a myth, this great system in his eyes, the church. And even though fundamentally he doesn't believe in the tenets of that church, he wants to be part of it. He lived his whole life as part of it. He taught it. And he wants to die in the arms of the Mother Church. Now, some people look at him and say, what a hypocrite. How could you live your whole life as a lie? How could you live your whole life deceiving people? It's something you yourself don't believe. You should have quit. Go become a taxi cab driver in some other community. No. You could look at it as a hypocrite. Or as Angela and Lazarus look at him as a saint. He was a person who in fact gave his life for his people, teaching the faith, teaching righteousness, consoling people in their sorrows, taking them from birth to death, and keeping them happy, content, and faithful. So what's the important thing here? The faith, the abstract faith, or the action? What makes a person a saint? Ideally, there should be both things put together. But here's a case, and Unamuno makes a very sharp case, of a person who was a saint in practice, but not a saint in thinking. Well, the end of the story is that Angelina, obviously, and Lazarus, they recommend that Don Manuel be called San Manuel. He should become a saint. And the book doesn't say he was sainted, but the name of the book is San Manuel Bueno. They call him Saint Manuel. So either he was sainted, or at least in the eyes of the authors of the book, he was a saint. So that's the story really of Moishe the Epicurus, who didn't believe in the mitzvot and the beliefs of Judaism, but he put on talit and tefillin and prayed anyway. Why? Because there's a distinction between how I think, how I believe, and what I do. And ultimately, the important thing is not what I think. The important thing is what I do. How do you live such a bifurcated life, though? How do you live with yourself? In one of his other books called The Tragic Sense of Life, Unamuno discusses further. He says, there are people who appear to think only with the brain, or with whatever may be specific thinking organ, while others think with all their body and all the soul, with the blood, with the marrow of the bones, with the heart, with lungs, with a belly, with life. The people who think only with the brain develop into definition mongers. They become the professionals of thought. Most tragic is the problem of philosophy, to reconcile intellectual necessities with the necessities of the heart and the will. But Unamuno had his own conflict. He was a philosopher, but he ultimately did not believe in philosophical systems. He said when we think too much, we become not human. We end up talking about religion, but not being religious. We talk about God without really relating to God. He has a very interesting point. He says, why is the Bible describing God always in anthropomorphic terms, as though God is the superhuman being? And he answers not like the Rambam. The Rambam says these are just poetic language, and really God is we have to understand God in philosophical terms. For Unamuno, if you try to understand God in philosophical terms, you're on the wrong track. you're never going to get a feeling about God. We're not interested in the philosophy of God. We're interested in God, the presence of God. The presence of God we can only feel with the totality of who we are. We can't get to God only through our brain. We have to have the feeling of the emotion. How can we get the feeling of emotion? Only if we feel God as somehow part of our own lives. We visualize, we personalize God because that's the only way we can relate to him. We're not praying to a first cause. We're not praying to a principle of physics. We're praying to a being that in somehow relates to us, that we feel the presence of. He says, I believe in God as I believe in my friends because I feel the breath of life of his affection. I feel his invisible and intangible hand, drawing me, leading me, grasping me, because I possess an inner consciousness of a particular providence and of a universal mind that marks out for me the course of my own destiny. Now, Unamuno kind of fluctuates. Sometimes he says, I don't believe in the next world. Religion is basically a myth that keeps us happy. On the other side, in his heart of hearts, he was born a very faithful Catholic and never left him. His faith was actually very strong. On one sense, he said, God created us. In another sense, he said, we create God. And how do we create God? Just as God created us in his image, we create God in our image. But when all is said and done, he feels the presence of God. Just like when Don Manuel is about to die, he said, I want to die in the arms of the Mother Church. I still am part of this game. Maybe my thoughts aren't 100% in line with it, but I still feel the connection. He says, the soul, my soul at least, longs for something else, not absorption, not quietude, not peace, not appeasement. It longs ever to approach and never to arrive. It longs for a never-ending longing, for an eternal hope, which is eternally renewed, but never wholly fulfilled. Now that's a very dynamic faith. In my opinion, Unamuno was in fact a religious man. Because religion doesn't mean I now have faith, I can put it in a box on the shelf, I can deposit it, it's safe. I have it all. And now I can live my life with the faith deposited safely away. No. Faith is dynamic. Sometimes I feel tremendously close to God, and sometimes I feel very alienated. Sometimes I'm sure that there's God. I feel God's touching me on my shoulder. Another moment I feel there is no God. All of that, the belief and the heresy, is part of faith. It's an interesting point. In other words, faith is dynamic. Faith is creative. Faith is a relationship with something eternal and immortal, something way beyond us. So sometimes we feel personally very close to it, and sometimes intellectually or even personally we feel remote from it. But here, he says it so beautifully. It longs a never-ending longing. Faith isn't, I finally achieved it, I can relax. Oh, great, I finally got God in my pocket. No, it's a never-ending longing, an eternal hope, which is eternally renewed, but never wholly fulfilled. Even at the moment of death, when there's no more illusions, even at the moment of death, Unamuno would say, is eternally renewed, but never wholly fulfilled. I don't get it. I still don't get it. Maybe there is a world after this world, and we'll find out the truth then. But until then, we're never going to be 100% certain. In another one of his book called Treatise on the Love of God, he writes as follows. To believe in God is in the first instance to want God to exist and to act as if he existed. In other words, says Unamuno, whether God does or doesn't exist as a philosophical truth is to the side. I want God to exist. I want to live my life as though God exists. And through this route of willing his existence and acting in accordance with such a desire is how we create God. And that is how God creates himself in us, how God manifests himself to us, opens and reveals himself to us. For God comes out to meet those who seek him with love, and out of love removes himself from the one who seeks him with cold, unloving reason. Says Unamuno, if you love God, it's an inner development. It's not God outside coming to you as a revelation. It's you inside, in a sense, creating godliness. And through the sense of feeling of God's presence, God exists for you. Does God exist objectively? It's not my concern. I'm trying to figure out my own life right now. For me, I've created God and God exists within me. If I try to find this God merely through reason and through philosophy, I see God with cold, unloving reason, I'm never going to find that God. I'm always going to be a heretic. I'm never going to be able to put the things together. Now, when I read Unamuno, I immediately thought of the book by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik called The Lonely Man of Faith. Now, Joseph Soloveitchik, and Unamuno are in different worlds. Unamuno's tortured mind. I don't know if he believes or doesn't believe. He believes in some strange way. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, Lahavdil, certainly believes in God, has total faith, no question. But what do they have in common? What they have in common is a sense of dynamism. The faith in God is not static. Sometimes you say, I'm frum. What do you mean I'm frum? Or I'm a Baal Teshuvah. What do you, I'm a Baal Teshuvah. A really religious person is going to say, I'm striving, I'm longing to fulfill my connection with God. I'm striving to fulfill God's word by observing the mitzvot. Life isn't what I have. Life is a striving, or what Unamuno describes as an eternal longing. I'm never going to get there. I'm always going to fall short, but I'm longing for it. There's a dream, there's an ideal. I'm trying to reach for it. Rabbi Soloveitchik has the same idea. His faith is very strong, but in The Lonely Man of Faith, it describes lonely doesn't mean I don't have friends. I don't have people who love me. I don't have people that I'm associated with. I have a lot of friends. I'm not alone. Lonely is something different. Lonely, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, something way inside, which is built into humanity. Each human being is created alone. I shouldn't say alone. I should say lonely. In other words, no one can be exactly us. We are who we are. No one else can be us. We individually have our own battle to fight, our own road to walk. And it has to be done only through us. No one can live our lives for us, only us. And no matter how many people I love and how many people love me, they can't do it for me. I have to do it myself. When you're born by yourself. When you die by yourself. There's nobody that could be a substitute for you. It's you. That's what lonely means. And Rabbi Soloveitchik sees the dynamic within us. He makes a distinction between Adam 1 and Adam 2. Without going into all the details, he says there are two aspects to who we are. One aspect is what he calls the majestic. We're creative. We want to use our minds. We want to create. We want to use our science. We want to advance ourselves aesthetically. We're social butterflies. We want to have a social connection. That's one part of us. As Adam 1. Adam 2 is different. Adam 2 isn't searching for majesty. Adam 2 is searching for redemption. Adam 1 feels success when he achieves something. Adam 2 feels success when he fails, when he surrenders to God. God, I'm nothing. I fall in your presence. God is the overwhelming. I submit myself to God. I want to read the way he describes Adam II. This is Rabbi Soloveitchik in The Lonely Man of Faith. Adam II keeps on wondering, who is he, that's the capital H, who is he, who trails me steadily, uninvited and unwanted, like an everlasting shadow, and vanishes into the recesses of transcendence the very instant I turn around to confront this numinous, awesome, and mysterious he? Who is he who fills Adam with awe and bliss, humility, a sense of greatness concurrently? Who is he to whom Adam clings in passionate, all-consuming love, and from whom he flees in mortal fear and dread? Who is he who fascinates Adam irresistibly, and at the same time rejects him irrevocably? Who is he whom Adam experiences both as a mysterium tremendum, a great mystery, and as the most elementary, most obvious, most understandable truth? Who is God who has revealed God and hidden God simultaneously? Who is he who life-giving and life-warming breath Adam feels constantly, and who at the same time remains distant and remote from all? That's Rabbi Soloveitchik. This is a different kind of faith. Adam 1 had a feel of faith. I'm successful. I dress nicely. I'm respected by my community. I have a good reputation. That's Adam 1. Adam 2, those things aren't important. Adam 2 is saying, I'm trying to find a connection with this all-being, all-powerful God. Sometimes I feel he's so close to me, closer than I am to myself. And sometimes I feel he's so distant, so aloof. I don't know, I have no contact at all. Towards the end of Lonely Man of Faith, Rabbi Soloveitchik offers his critique of modern religion. He calls it Western man or Western woman, Western human beings. He says, Western human beings are determined not to accept the dialectical burden of humanity. What's a dialectical burden? The dialectical burden is we're both Adam 1, who want majesty. We're also Adam 2, that want humility, redemption, surrender. Those are two things, two different things. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, modern times, we only care about Adam 1. We forgot about Adam 2. He certainly feels spiritually uprooted, emotionally disillusioned, and he's aware of his own tragedy. Yet this pensive mood does not arouse him to heroic action. He, of course, comes to a place of worship. Okay, we go to synagogue. He attends lectures on religion, such as this one, right? And appreciates the ceremonial. And yet he is searching not for faith in all the singularity and otherness, but for religious culture. He seeks not the greatness found in sacrificial action, but the convenience one discovers in a comfortable, serene state of mind. He is desirous of an aesthetic experience rather than a covenantal one. What's Rabbi Soloveitchik's point? We want basically to live in a socially comfortable environment, and religion plays this role. We go to synagogue, hopefully the synagogues will open more once this COVID thing gets settled. We have friends, we talk, we have kiddush, have a little cookie with them and a little glass of wine. We feel warm, we talk to good people that we like. We listen to beautiful music in the synagogue. Hopefully we learn a little bit, we sing some prayers. And it's generally a very nice aesthetic experience and a communal experience. And Rabbi Soloveitchik doesn't dismiss that. But he said, when we go to synagogue, what are we looking for? Are we looking for Adam 1 qualities, namely these qualities of sociability, a feeling of successfulness, of being accepted in the community? Or are we going as Adam 2, really looking for God? Bowing ourselves down, humbling ourselves, surrendering ourselves to God. That is a totally different experience. It's possible to go to synagogue every day, every week, and never feel one time that you're in the presence of God. And it's possible, even if you don't go to synagogue, to feel God tapping you on the shoulder, feeling that closeness. You're walking through Central Park, you're walking along the lake, you feel something. You can't verbalize it, you can't spell it out, but you feel something. Unamuno struggled with this dialectic between faith and action. Rabbi Soloveitchik also struggled, but he didn't struggle between faith and action because he realized both are connected. What his problem is that our faith is more in the category of something of convenience rather than something of a powerful spiritual transformation within us. But both of them agree that faith is not static. Faith is not something you have. Faith is something you constantly are growing and trying to attain. It's a longing. It's a constant yearning. And I think that one of the mistakes we make in modern Jewish life and modern religion in general is focusing too much on what Rabbi Soloveitchik calls the Adam 1 content. When people say that our synagogue is successful, how many members do we have? How big is our budget? How many people attend service? Everything's quantified. You know, how important are we? How influential are we? These are not unimportant. I don't disagree that those things have importance. But the real question is, do people feel a longing? Do they come to synagogue and feel, I'm coming in the presence of an eternal force I don't fully understand, but that I want to feel a greater understanding. I want to feel something's happening to me and transforming me internally. You can't have that feeling every day. You can't have that feeling every once a week, once a month. You can't put a time clock on it, but you could be receptive to it. And the question is, do our religious teachings as currently practiced, do they even make us receptive to this kind of feeling? And look, we who are in this part of the Zoom class, we're trying to do that. But, and I don't want to criticize anybody else, everyone has to work on their own. But it seems to me, just from my own experience as a rabbi of more than 50 years, just reading other synagogue bulletins and knowing so many rabbis, and working for so many years in the synagogues in the rabbinical world, it seems that too often we forget the fundamental fact. Religion is a longing. Religion is a trying to grow. All of us are balei teshuvah. All of us are striving to be better. And if we don't have that sense of striving, the whole thing is a game. Now let's just go back to where we started. We started off with San Manuel Bueno, and I call him San Manuel Bueno. He was a saint. His faith was not perfect. He knew it, and he told Lazarus it wasn't perfect. But he was a saint in terms of the way he lived his life. He wanted people to live like Adam was, comfortable, happy, believing in the church. That's fine. But he himself really was an Adam too. He was an Adam too. He didn't fulfill his longing, or his longing hit a dead end, but in spirit, he was striving. And I think that's the ultimate goal. Live righteously, do the right thing, but in our minds of minds, constantly to be growing, constantly in turmoil. A person of faith is not a person who can sleep easily at night. A person of faith is a person who's constantly striving, growing, bubbling over with ideas and ideals. So that's our talk for today. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions or comments. mdangel@jewishideas.org. mdangel@jewishideas.org. Next week, we're going to be discussing the novel Daniel Deronda, which is a phenomenally interesting novel. Very, very long. If you haven't read it, it's a very long novel, but very worthwhile. There's also a movie made of it. And the week after that, we're going to be doing Ibsen's play, The Enemy of the People. We'll be doing things that relate to those works as well. So thanks again for checking in, and have a good day, good health, and we love you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you,
you.
Brave.
Good health and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.